I jerked awake. Sorry. I jerked awake at a loud bang, as if someone had just kicked in a door nearby. Sleep vanished instantly. The echo of the blow still rang in my ears, and my breathing had broken into short, ragged breaths. I reflexively clutched the edge of the blanket and bolted upright in bed for the first time few seconds. For the first few seconds, the first time. Wake up. I didn't even understand where I was. Brick walls, a narrow bed, a dark ceiling, it became obvious at once that this wasn't my dorm room. I barely had time to sink into my thoughts before another dull thud sounded, followed at once by a sharp voice I could mistake for anyone else's. How long are you gonna lounge around in there? Hot water doesn't last forever. There was no mistaking that sharp, irritated tone. Someone snorted loudly behind the shower door. The water kept running, and an answering voice came from inside, more muffled, but just as familiar. You won't die if you wait a couple of hours for more water to heat up. And anyway, I got up early on purpose so I could shower in peace. Why are you on my case? I blinked, trying to gather my thoughts. My fingers were still trembling a little, but the panic was gradually fading. I carefully lowered my legs from the bed, and the moment my feet touched the cold floor, a shiver ran across my skin. I got to my feet and crossed to the door carefully. My hand reached for the knob of its own, though part of me would rather have crawled back under the blanket and pretended none of this existed. Still, I gathered what little courage I had left and slowly cracked the door open. The narrow brick corridor was washed in dim morning light. Ray stood right in front of the shower door, braced against the frame, and, judging by the look of it, having just shoved it with his shoulder. The door opened a crack, and the guy with wet white hair I'd seen yesterday stepped out from behind it. They crashed into each other, and a moment later were locked in some ridiculous, boyish scuffle. Ray smirked and yanked at the other's shirt, which was hanging around his neck. The other guy shoved him back with his shoulder, sending water from his wet hair splattering across the floor. It didn't look like a real fight so much as a familiar squabble between two people who had known each other for a long time. A quiet laugh slipped out before I could stop it. It sounded so out of place that even I was startled by it. I hurriedly covered my mouth with my hand, but it was already too late. God, you're so damn annoying. He didn't get to finish. Both of them turned towards me at the same time. Ray's hand froze where it was, still clenching in the other guy's shirt. Wet strands clung to his temples, and water still dripped from the ends. A brief flicker of surprise crossed their faces, as if neither had expected this little scene to have an audience. Strange, yesterday they seemed like monsters, now they look more like ordinary boys. At that moment, the handle of the neighboring door turned with a quick click. Dan stepped into the corridor, yawning and smoothing a hand through his ginger hair. You two are making a racket again this early in the morning. He muttered it, still half asleep. He was already about to walk past when he caught sight of me by the doorway out of the corner of his eye, and in that same second seemed to fully wake up. Oh, good morning. I pressed my shoulder a little harder into the door frame. Good morning. I hesitated for a moment, but in the end managed to return to greeting. Good morning. At that, Dan visibly softened, the corners of his mouth lifting into a small, encouraging smile. You seem a little better today already. I'm honestly glad to see you looking more alert. He took half a step closer, but still left a small, safe distance between us. There was neither pity nor cold calculation in his gaze, only careful attentiveness. Sorry for being so blunt, but I'm not your enemy, and I don't intend to hurt you, so you can relax a little. Though I suppose that's a strange thing to hear from a criminal. He gave quite little huff of amusement. As if at himself, and at that same moment a sharp metallic clink sounded behind him. The same wet-haired guy who had been butting heads with Ray by the shower a second ago suddenly pulled a watch from his pocket and flicked a quick glance at the face. Cursing under his breath, he hurriedly started buttoning his shirt as he moved. Damn it, I'm late. Alright, I gotta go. Have a good day, everyone. He darted past us, leaving nothing but damp footprints on the floor behind him, and hurried out of sight down the stairwell. From the thunder of his receding footsteps, it was easy to guess he was practically flying down the stairs at a run. I followed him with my eyes, and only then clearly felt that heavy, displeased stare on me again. Ray was already standing nearby. He had approached it without a sound, and now he looked back and forth between Dan and me with obvious irritation. Listen, Dan, I told you to lock her in. What if she'll run off in the middle of the night? The word lock made my skin crawl. It sounded too impersonal, as if he were talking about a suitcase instead of a person. Dan didn't look away. He answered calmly. Do you really think she was capable of something like that in the state she was in? Ray clicked his tongue in annoyance and waved it off as if he had no interest in arguing further. Fine, either way, we are lucky she's still here. He stepped aside as if giving Dan and me room to continue, but deliberately stayed close enough all the same. Dan turned to me again. Sorry I didn't even ask your name. Yesterday didn't exactly feel like the right time. He smiled a little and his voice softened noticeably. So what's your name? I paused to think for a moment. Right, if they don't know my real name, then I can choose whatever I want. In that case... Okay, Celia, Leah. Okay, yeah, sure, Cortez. Why not? Let's confirm. Nice to meet you, Celia. The new name rolled easily off his tongue, as if he were testing how it fit me. I'm Dan. He gave a short nod towards Ray. And that guy who's always in a bad mood is Ray. Before his next words, he took the faintest breath, as though bracing himself for how they would sound. Right now, you're in our gang's headquarters and safe house. Ray's brow twitched in irritation. Hey, maybe don't go laying all our cards on the table in front of the first stranger we come across. He stepped closer and put himself between Dan and me. Annoyance rang in his voice, but beneath it there was a cold certainty, as if he were merely restating the order of things. Dan raised his hands in a placating gesture. Sorry, but I think she deserves an answer to at least that much. I curled my fingers tighter into the fabric of my dress. What are you going to do with me? Silence settled over the hallway. Ray looked me straight in the eye, and there wasn't a trace of sympathy in his gaze. Miss, I'm the one asking questions here. He tilted his head, studying my reaction. Looks like you still haven't grasped your position, so I'll be lenient and just this once spell it out for you. The word lenient made something inside me twist unpleasantly, but I forced myself not to look away. It just so happens your short-sighted father got himself far too deep in criminal dealings. As the attack dog of Chicago's criminal elite, he crossed the wrong people and paid for it with his life. He said it calmly, almost lazily, as if he were talking about someone else's failed deal. And you ended up in our hands as compensation. The trouble is, your value is highly questionable. He gave a crooked little smile, and a cold knot tightened in my chest. I decided not to jump to conclusions and sent one of my men to find out whether there was any demand for you at all. A dull rush filled my head. For one sharp second, I felt the unfamiliar body all woken up in chance from within. Unfortunately, we won't have that answer until he comes back. Ray stepped back slightly, as if that settled the matter for the time being. So you'll just have to wait nice and obediently until evening. Obediently, huh? But I still didn't argue. I simply nodded, took a step back, and before anyone could demand anything else from me, returned to my room. After closing the door behind me, I stood there for a while longer, my palm pressed to the cold handle. Then I let out a slow breath, went over to the bed, and sat down on the edge of the mattress. My mother's face surfaced in my memory almost at once. I pictured her sitting somewhere in a hospital corridor or a half-dark room, fingers digging into the chair as she listened to a doctor's dry voice telling her they'd done everything they could. My father, who would look composed on the outside as always, while inside he was falling into the same abyss she was. To them, I was dead. The thought came with brutal clarity, and it hurt in a way that felt physical. My eyes started to sting, and I didn't realize right away that tears were already running down my cheeks. Back in 2025, my parents were still there, and by now they'll probably receive the notice, signed the paperwork, and heard some stranger offer formal condolences. My few friends were still there too, and the group chat where someone might have typed a confused "Did you hear?" before the whole conversation simply died. I clenched my fingers tighter. I didn't just wake up in someone else's body, I really died in my own world. This wasn't some fantasy novel with a portal in the back of a wardrobe, and it wasn't a game where I could just hit load. There were no system rules here and no bizarre quests. There was only one dry fact. My body was laying somewhere in a New York morgue while I was sitting here in the headquarters of Texas gangsters in 1925. There was no connection between those 2 points. The longer I thought about it, the more a heavy, dragging feeling swelled inside me. It pulled me down into a thick, sticky darkness I hadn't even fully crawled out of yet. I angrily wiped the tears away with the back of my hand. If I keep digging into this, I'm just going to drown. Dad always said there were things you couldn't change no matter how much you wanted to, and the only thing left was deciding what to do next. I couldn't go back there, and there was nowhere to return when I didn't even have my own body anymore. So all I had left was this world, this body, and this strange, dangerous new life. I drew a deep breath, tried to gather my scattered thoughts into a single line, and forcibly pushed away the image of my mother, my father, my friends, the university library, and the city streets at night. I didn't have time to bury myself a second time. I needed to think about how to survive here. Time dragged. I sat down, lay down, got up again, and started pacing the narrow room from corner to corner. My thoughts kept circling too, just like I did. At some point, my stomach reminded me of itself with a loud, treacherous growl. I looked at the door. And how long exactly am I going to keep playing the proud prisoner who won't even ask for a drink? I had no idea whether an hour had passed or two. My head had cleared a little, and the first sharp edges of fear had dulled. All that remained was exhaustion and the very ordinary, very earthly feeling of hunger. In the end, I finally made up my mind. Carefully cracking the door open, I peeked into the hallway. No one was there. I stepped out, then took another step, trying to move as quickly as possible. I just wanted to find one of them and ask whether I could have a little food and water. I turned towards the kitchen and nearly ran straight into a tall figure. Oh! I instinctively stepped back. A tall, dark-haired man with cold blue eyes stood in front of me. His face remained expressionless, but there was something grim about his whole bearing. He paused for a second, giving me a brief assessing glance from head to toe. It was a short, indifferent look, the kind reserved for something irrelevant, yes. It's like, what? Irrelevant, that had accidentally gotten in the way. He gave no reaction at all. He simply turned away, as if I weren't there in the first place, and continued down the corridor towards the kitchen with the same steady stride. My eyes followed him before I could stop them. He didn't even say a word, as if I weren't here at all. Snatches of conversation drifted from the kitchen, but the moment he walked in, the voices quieted a little. A moment later, I heard his low, slightly hoarse voice. I get it, you live here and all. He paused briefly, and I immediately pictured him frowning. But maybe don't turn the headquarters into a brothel. I froze for a second. Wait a second. The remark hadn't been aimed at me directly, but the implication was more than clear. I lowered my gaze to my slightly wrinkled dress, my somewhat disheveled hair, and the high boots hastily laced, peeking out from beneath the hem. Did he just take me for some loose woman? My cheeks burned. Something thudded in the kitchen, probably someone dragging back a chair, and then Dan's familiar voice rang out, already a little more lively. Listen, Lo, it's not like that. After that, the words blurred into a dull background hum. I couldn't make out the explanation, only caught stray fragments now and then, like courteous daughter, compensation yesterday, and a quiet, dissatisfied I see spoken in that same grim voice. When they were done, footsteps drifted back towards the hallway. I stayed where I was, unable either to walk away or to pretend I hadn't heard anything. In the end, I managed neither. A tall, dark-haired man stepped out of the kitchen and headed towards me. He stopped in front of me, this time no longer pretending I was invisible. His gaze was still calm, but no longer as indifferent as it had been the first time. You'll have to forgive me. He spoke dryly, evenly, without much emotion. But I honestly couldn't think of any other reason a young and beautiful girl would be in a place like this. The word beautiful sounded calm, like a simple statement of fact. There was no flirtation in it, no attempt to soften what he said. He was simply carefully admitting he'd been wrong. I blinked, trying to make sense of the whole awkward situation. There was an apology, sort of, and he did call me beautiful. And still, a faint bitterness lingered inside me. At that moment, Dan appeared over his shoulder. He looked a little awkward, as if he accidentally overheard the conversation. That had nothing to do with him, only to get dragged into it anyway, and decided to step in. Oh, right. He gave me a quick nod, then shifted his gaze to the dark-haired man and nodded to him as well. Lo, this is Celia. Celia, this is Lo. We exchanged brief glances. I still remembered his first remark about the bordel, and he still seemed a little guilty for having said it. The pause stretched on, and then hurried to break the tension. "Celia, did you need something?" He said it in such a natural tone, as though that were exactly why I'll come out into the hallway. I shifted awkwardly, feeling a slight warmth rise to my cheeks. The words cogged in my throat for a second. "I wanted to ask if I could have something to eat." I felt the heat rush to my cheeks again. Against all the talk of buyers and compensation, asking for food sounded almost ridiculous. Dan looked visibly flustered. "Damn." He ran a hand through his hair and grimaced guiltily. "Sorry, we all scattered first thing in the morning and somehow completely forgot you still hadn't eaten anything. Not because we were planning to starve you or anything." He raised both hands as if defending himself before someone unseen. "Honestly, we just had other things on our minds." I gave a small nod. At least he cares enough to think about it. "We've still got some cornbread, some beans, and some ham from last night's supper. Nothing fancy, of course, but will it do?" At the mere thought of it, my stomach answered with a quiet, approving growl. "Yes, thank you." He paused for a moment, then went on. "I'll bring you to your room. That way you won't have to trouble yourself with another run-in with Ray." At the mention of Ray, my fingers curled a little tighter on their own. The idea of avoiding him for as long as possible was especially appealing. "All right, thank you." I let out a slightly easier breath. Dan smiled softly, as though the thought that he could at least help me with this made him feel a little better. "Then go on back to your room. I'll be there in a minute." I obediently went back to my room and felt the exhaustion come crashing down again the moment I was alone in that cramped little space. After a while, the door quietly eased open, and he really did bring what he promised. There was warm cornbread on the plate, some beans, and a couple slices of ham. Besides, it stood a mug of tea. Yeah, I would love the beans, because I love beans. I would not be able to eat the cornbread because I'm allergic to corn too. Yeah, I'm allergic to everything. It's something else. I would probably put the ham aside, because ham is like the worst type of food that you can actually eat. Yes, ham is really bad for your health, really bad. Yeah, it's better if you just eat a steak. I'm not joking. It's better if you eat a steak than eating this processed type of meat food. This is horrible for your body, really bad. And I would take the mug of tea. I would prefer coffee, but yeah, sure. I ate without thinking about anything. Yeah, but when you're hungry, you eat anything, right? Unless you have allergies. Yeah, like me, unless you have allergies, because then that's another thing. Each bite pulled me a little further. Yeah, it depends. My allergies, it depends. I have things that give me rash. I have things that the most common one is it's insane. The most common one is my tongue gets swollen. It's usually sometimes it's my body. My body is when it's soy. I'm allergic to soy too. When it's soy, is my body gets really swollen. But most things, I wouldn't say that it's so much as a rash. With corn, it's more a rash. But it's more like my tongue starts to swollen, and it's something else, because we don't literally think that our tongue is actually, it has a certain length, okay? So what happens when your tongue starts to swollen is that like it gets swollen in the back too, and then you want to breathe and you cannot breathe because the tongue is completely swollen. Yeah, it can be very fatal too. Yes, because you want to breathe and you are not able, and you're not able through like the nostrils because it affects the those canals in there too. I always say like the canals because we say canals in here, but like yeah, you cannot breathe through your nose and you cannot breathe through your mouth either. So it's like, yeah, it starts getting really difficult. Each bite pulled me a little further from those clinging thoughts and brought me back to one simple fact. I was alive, I had a plate of food, and there was someone who, at least formally, considered it his duty to make sure I was fed. When the plate was almost empty, I sat there a while longer, staring at the neatly nibbled edge of the bread and the empty mug. My thoughts slowly began to gather again. In such a short time, he's already done so much for me. He carefully got me out of that room, gave me a chance to catch my breath, and now he's feeding me too. And he seems to be the only one here who talks to me like a person instead of a merchandise. I got to my feet, deciding to return the dishes and at least thank him properly. Yeah, but he's also like, he's part of the scenes. I don't remember which scene is he. Oh, he's Envy. He's Envy. Okay. Sorry that I'm kind of like spoiling it for you, but I was like curious because she's like, oh, because you know, he's like so gentle and cute and all of it, you know. The other guy is Greed. Ray, right? He's Greed. I thought he was going to be Wrath. Yeah, I was like, oh, maybe he's like Wrath or something. I don't know, but no, he's Greed, and this guy is Envy. The tray in my hands felt absurdly heavy, but the gesture itself, the fact that I was doing at least something on my own, made me feel a little calmer inside. The hallway was quiet, no voices, no footsteps. I peeked into the kitchen, but it was empty. A table, a couple of chairs, an icebox, and an ashtray carelessly left behind. So, icebox. If someone had said the word icebox to me in 2025, I would have pictured a giant chunk of ice somewhere up in the mountains. But in the kitchen, it means something completely different. An icebox is an old-fashioned kind of refrigerator that's cooled not by electricity, but by real ice. On the outside, it looks like a wooden cabinet with shelves for food. A real block of ice would be loaded into a compartment at the top or on the side to keep everything inside cooled. I saw with the side ones. I never saw it like on the top. Yeah. You would have it like on the side. You would have like blocks of ice on the sides. The ice slowly melted and cooled the air inside. Thanks to that, food lasted longer, the milk didn't sour in a single day, and the meat didn't turn into a problem after just a few hours. It sounds almost romantic until you remember the obvious. Someone had to regularly get that ice from somewhere, yes. Haul it over and swap it out, yep. They say that in the heat, a single block might last only a day or two. Sometimes a bit longer if you hardly opened the icebox and the house itself stayed cooler. In some cities, there were entire services built around delivering ice, and people lived as if cold were its own separate line in the household budget. I only recognized the icebox because I only saw one in a museum. There it looked like a cute historical artifact, almost like a prop. And here it just stands in the kitchen like an ordinary piece of furniture, a reminder that I've landed in an era where even cold is something you have to literally buy and haul in by hand. The funniest part is that I really did have time to think, oh, what a pretty little cabinet. I set the dishes down at the edge of the table. Well then, I'll thank him properly when I get the chance. Looks like everyone's busy with something right now. A cautious spark of excitement flickered inside me. If fate has handed me a moment like this, it would be a sin not to use it and look around a little. So this is probably another one that I need. Oh no, I don't. I had just taken my first step towards the staircase leading deeper into the building when a voice sounded behind me right by my ear. I don't recall anyone giving you permission to wander around here on your own. The voice cut through the silence like cold, heavy steel. A shiver ran down my spine as though my skin had been splashed with icy water. My heart skipped a beat, then started pounding so hard it became difficult to breathe. My palms went sleek, my fingers clenched convulsively at empty air. I didn't know who was standing behind me, but everything inside me screamed one thing in panic: run. Except my body felt paralyzed and my feet seemed rooted to the floor. Slowly, with effort, I forced myself to turn around. My lips had already gone pale and my stomach twisted painfully, as though someone had pulled an invisible knot tied inside me. But the moment I turned my head, reality came crashing down in an entirely different light. The person standing in front of me wasn't the icy monster I voluntarily painted in my mind, but the same guy who'd gotten into that painful scuffle with Ray earlier this morning. He stared at me with wide eyes, clearly not expecting to see such naked terror on my face, then quickly raised his hands as if to show he wasn't armed. Hey, what's wrong? There was genuine confusion in his voice, even a hint of panic. What the? I blinked, trying to shake off the lingering tremor. I just imagine it. Too much stress in too short a time. Now I'm starting to imagine things. The guy narrowed his eyes and, catching himself, quickly hid his confusion behind a faint smirk. Don't scare me like that. I may not be an angel, but I'm not scary enough to make you go pale at the sight of me. He shifted half a step aside to give me room. I'm Ernie, in case you haven't heard my name yet. Celia. I answered almost automatically, even though the new name still felt a little unfamiliar, like a new pair of shoes that hadn't been broken in yet. I know. I paused for a second. That's strange. He'd already left by the time I said my name. Looks like someone filled him in. As if he'd read my thoughts, he added, "News travel fast around here, so don't be surprised." He tilted his head slightly, never taking his attentive gaze off me. "So, what are you doing wandering around headquarters all by yourself?" "Not that it's any of my business. I don't really care what you're doing here." The Ray definitely won't be thrilled. I felt the color drain from my face again, while that heavy hum still lingered in my chest. My fingers were still trembling slightly, even though I was doing my best to look calm and on the outside. I was just returning the dishes. I see. He nodded as though that explanation was perfectly enough, paused for a moment, then spoke in a much more serious tone. "Are you sure you're okay? You look like you're about to collapse." I didn't have time to come up with a convincing answer and only gave a slight shrug. Ernie narrowed his eyes as though he made up his mind in that brief instant. "You know what? Let's go outside." I don't know. Let me see. Ernie, Gluttony. Gluttony. This guy is the gluttony one. Okay. I blinked in surprise. Outside. Yeah, it's stuffy in here, and if you're only just recovered from all this, some fresh air definitely wouldn't hurt. Maybe it'll feel a little easier out there. Taking a short step towards the stairs, he glanced back over his shoulder. Coming? I still had trouble believing this was even possible. Won't that be a problem? Not if I'm with you. It shouldn't be anyway, but... He raised his index finger and brought it to his lips. Just don't tell Ray or the others later that I let you do this. It would still like to stay. I would still. Okay, I would. It's not it. It. Okay. I'll still like to stay alive. Sorry, it was me. I was reading it in, I don't know, another way. He winked as if turning a possible breach of the rules into some harmless, childish prank. I swallowed, feeling my fear slowly begin to mix with curiosity. He's offering to take me outside himself? I'll be stupid to let a chance like this slip away. I gave a small nod. Ernie made a brief gesture towards the door, and the two of us headed for the exit. We stepped outside and stopped a little to the side of the entrance. After the stuffy interior, the air outside felt almost starlightingly fresh. I took a few steps forward and stopped, leaning my back against the warm brick wall of the headquarters. Ernie settled beside me, resting one shoulder against the wall too, and turning slightly away so he wouldn't stare at me directly. Fresh air washed over my face. I took a deep breath and immediately felt the anxiety inside me begin to loosen. My head cleared a little, the pounding in my temples eased, and the ground beneath my feet stopped feeling unsteady. A sloping stretch of land opened up before us. The building stood on a slight rise, and below it sprawled a district that looked more like a slum. A narrow strip of harbor showed along the horizon. Crooked streets, low houses, laundry hanging here and there from lines stretched between rooftops. On the road I could make out an old-fashioned car with an angular silhouette and narrow wheels. The architecture around us spoke for itself too. No glass boxes, no familiar lines of a modern city. That panorama was more than enough to make me understand at last. Yeah, this clearly isn't just some other city, and definitely not the 21st century. For a while, I stayed silent, pretending I was just getting used to the light and the air. But then I decided that letting the silence drag on would only make things harder. Now's the time to make sure for good. I stole a glance at Ernie. He seemed to be studying the horizon in thought, but from the faint narrowing of his eyes, I could tell he was still keeping me in his line of sight. After a short pause, I spoke carefully. Can I ask you something? By the way, by talking about the asking and all of it, let's put another save, because I never know. Ernie turned his head slightly. Well, you can try, no promises I'll answer, but maybe you'll get lucky. There was a flicker of mild curiosity in his voice. I just need to ask normal questions. He can suspect anything. Can we ask all of them? I don't know. So ask what they do. I hesitated for a couple of seconds before asking. It was a rather delicate question after all. You deal in smuggling, don't you? I glanced towards the crates stacked near the building. I've noticed crates all over this place. Prohibition doesn't make things easier for people like that. So this is what Americans call the period when alcohol was officially outlawed. Prohibition went into effect in 1920, and lasted until 1933. So yes, I ended up right in the era when on paper the country is sobering up, but in practice it's learning to lie, hide, and pay the ones who look the other way. The irony thing is the ban didn't kill alcohol, it just pushed it into the shadows. Instead of legal bars, underground ones appeared and they were called speakeasies. Yeah, the speakeasies. Instead of ordinary trade, smuggling, bootleggers, and homebrewed liquor flourished. Port cities and major roads almost turned into gold mines in those years. Textbooks always explain prohibition with noble intentions. A fight against drunkenness, family tragedies, poverty, and crime. Yeah, that is true. Only reality, it seems, offers a different conclusion. When something is banned, it doesn't disappear. It just becomes more expensive, more dangerous, and much more tempting for those who love risk. There's another nuance people usually forget in romantic stories about jazz and city lights. Alcohol didn't always come only from under the counter. Sometimes it slipped through legal loopholes. Medical alcohol by prescriptions, sacramental wine for religious services, and even industrial alcohol that some people somehow managed to turn into something drinkable. On that last line, I tried to sound a little more casual, as though I were only repeating something I heard from someone else. For someone who was kept behind your walls, you sound awfully sure of yourself when you talk about prohibition. There was a trace of mockery in his voice, but no reproach. If anything, it sounded more like genuine surprise. I've got to admit, for someone raised in a hothouse, you know quite a bit. In another situation, that might have stung. Right now, though, I had no time for that, and I could use the opening. I just listened a lot. Servants love gossip. Who makes their money how, and what got them where they are. When you're never allowed to go anywhere yourself, all you can do is listen to other people's stories. He nodded thoughtfully. All right, let's say I buy that. Then he smirked, looking off into the distance. We merely help people suffer a little less from thirst in spite of government restrictions. Nothing heroic about it, just a pure public service. He shrugged. Ray doesn't like outsiders knowing too much about our business, but since you've already noticed plenty, all I can say is that you're not far off. He leaned in slightly, looking into my eyes. Still, it's funny that this is what concerns you and not your own life or whatever becomes of it. I looked away, trying to come up with the most believable explanation I could. I just try not to think about it more than I have to. So they really were exactly the kind of men textbooks and films liked to paint as the romanticized criminals of the Prohibition era. You know, one of the things that I think I like in this game, that I think the developers did very well, was that you actually have the text in a more central position in here. Which I love it, because I don't have to put like my head going from one side to the other side. You know, like I like that. It's like in the middle of it. It is good. I like that. So ask about the year. Just remind me what year it is. After everything that's happened, I've gotten all mixed up about the dates. I try to say it as casually as possible, as if I were asking about a forgotten day of the week. The year. I forced myself to nod with a faint, strained smile. Sure, shock can make a person forget a lot, but not to that extent. Something gave an unpleasant twinge inside me. I had to put on an embarrassed grimace. 1925. He answered anyway with a shrug. If you want the exact answer, the year's already a few months in. I nodded, trying not to let it show how cold everything inside me had suddenly gone. the same year as on the newspaper, to ask about the place. I looked around once more as if only just noticing the surroundings. Tell me, where exactly are we right now? This is the outskirts of Houston, isn't it? I tried to say the city's name calmly, like it was something long familiar to me. Inside, everything tightened. Ernie studied me more closely. Don't recognize the area? He held my gaze for a couple of seconds, then smirked. Fair enough, it's not like he brought you here on a sightseeing train. He nodded down towards the docks and the slums. Yeah, this is Houston, the northern part, closer to the shipping docks. Practically the edge of town. You could call it the middle of nowhere. My gaze swept over the line of warehouses below, the rustle rooftops, the distant masts of cargo ships. So I really am in Houston, the port city of Texas, in Texas. After asking all that, I somehow felt both lighter and heavier. With every answer, the picture that had already begun to form in my mind settled more firmly into place. The year, the city, the smuggling, everything matched what I've read in books and heard in lectures, only now it wasn't theory anymore, it was more reality. It was my reality, sorry. I leaned more firmly against the wall and looked towards the horizon. Far off, smoke drifted lazily from factory chimneys. Someone was honking a car horn. Carts creaked and muffled voices carried through the air. The world kept going, utterly indifferent that one soul thrown into it was trying to understand what time she'd woken up in and what she was supposed to do next. So I really am in the United States during Prohibition. In Houston, in the body of a dead local mob boss's daughter. In the den of a gang that clearly isn't in the business of charity. Strangely enough, that realization brought two feelings with it at once. The first was heavy, dark, dragging me down like a stone at the bottom of a river. A sense of being lost, of everything I'd known about my own life having been left behind there in 2025. The second was a fragile certainty. Frightening, yes, but certainly all the same. If I've really been thrown here, then at least I understand more or less what I'm dealing with. This wasn't chaos anymore, it was a familiar chapter from a textbook, only a deadly one, and I've somehow been dropped straight into it. I turned my gaze to Ernie. He seemed surprisingly carefree considering everything that was happening. Even so, his answers had clarified a great deal. Stay silent, say thank you. Yes, sure, thank you, dudes. Thank you. He turned his head slightly towards me. For what exactly? For bringing me out here and for answering my questions? He gave a brief, crooked smile. I'm not used to being thanked for little things like that, but all right, you're welcome. He pushed himself off the wall with one shoulder, stretched his stiff back, and glanced towards the door again. Let's stay out here a little longer, then head back before Ray decides I've stolen his valuable hostage. Taking a deep breath, I allowed myself for a couple of seconds to simply exist in this strange world that had become at least a little more understandable. Just as I was about to head back, I caught sight of a figure on the horizon from the corner of my eye. In the light of the setting sun, the silhouette at first looked like nothing more than a dark blur, but the moment I focused on it, my breath faltered. A very tall man was making his way up towards us, dressed in clothes that looked wholly out of place here. A long, loose upper garment, fabric falling in soft folds, a high collar, and a narrow cloth sash at the waist. Altogether, it looked more like traditional Eastern clothing, perhaps Chinese, than anything else, anything one would expect to see in Texas. His features were distinctly Asian, yet there was something about him that made it impossible to leave it at that and simply call him Asian. Sharp cheekbones, a somewhat severe profile, skin darkened as if by long days beneath the southern sun. His long dark hair, shaded into green at the ends, was tied into a thin, impeccably neat ponytail that swayed with soft grace in the wind, echoing each of his steps. Yeah, like in terms of like the Asia, I think like Chinese people are the ones that have like in terms of like the face, they have like more of an oval type of face. While, for instance, the Japanese have more round. You will notice that, like when you try to distinguish like Asian people, you will notice that Chinese usually have more of an oval. It's not always like that, but like I'm talking about the average. They have more an oval type, and the Japanese have more a round type of face, and the Koreans have more of it's oval, but it's like a mix of the oval with the round. But you can notice that in terms of like the cheekbones, it's more prominent in them than in the Japanese's or the Chinese's. It's more prominent in there. Yeah, so like sometimes you can like how to put it? Sometimes it's like you can like distinguish them by like these little things. But of course you have like other people like in Asia, like from Thailand, from Malaysia, from Singapore, from Vietnam, from you have like a ton of people in there, so sometimes it's kind of hard, yeah, but especially like with those three, I kind of like see it a bit like that. Of course, like I go by the ear because I can understand when it's like one or the other. Sometimes I have a harder time because you have like a lot of Chineses that speak in Cantonese, and Cantonese is not as easy for me to distinguish when I'm hearing. Yeah, Cantonese is not so easy for me. But like then I just kind of like go by ear when I'm like, okay, this guy is from Thailand, or this guy is from China, or from Japan, or from Korea. He moved with an easy, fluid grace. Even walking in a straight line, he looked graceful in a way that felt almost unnatural for a man of his weight. New York had been a fairly international city. I've seen plenty of people with Asian features on the streets there, but never man this beautiful. Which one is my favorite? I prefer the Chinese's, man. Yeah, I do. I think they are very beautiful. I think most of us prefer, from what I've been seeing, most women in the Western, they prefer the Koreans, but I prefer the Chinese men. I think they are very beautiful. You have like extremely beautiful Chinese men. Like I think they are very beautiful, yeah. At some point, I caught myself openly staring at him and hurriedly looked away. Just in time too, because he wasn't passing by. He was heading quite deliberately straight here, towards our building. Was he with them too? Even someone like him, so clearly neither local nor American, is connected to this gang. As he came closer, his features sharpened, and Ernie, who had been quietly leaning against the wall until then, perked up and called out to him as if they saw each other every day. "Hey Lei, you actually decided to show up today." The tall man let out a short, tired breath. "I sent word that I had other businesses to attend to. I came as soon as I could." His voice was low and calm, with no trace of excuse in it, just a simple statement of fact. He was almost past us, already turning towards the entrance out of habit, when his gaze caught on me at the last moment. Slowing down, he turned his head and gave me a quick, faintly surprised glance. There was no hostility in that look, no tension, only a mild, quiet curiosity. He gave a barely noticeable nod, as if in greeting. Without even realizing it, I nodded back on instinct. Why do I have this strange feeling we've met somewhere before? I didn't get to finish the thought because Ernie lightly touched my elbow, gently drawing my attention back to him. All right, walk's over for today. We definitely need to head back now. Will should be back soon, and Ray will probably want to go over the next steps. He glanced back at Lei over his shoulder and, as he passed by, casually tossed out, "If anyone asks, you didn't see anything." Lei said nothing, only gave a short nod as if situations like this were perfectly ordinary to him. After that, he headed for the entrance without looking back, slipping past us with an easy, confident stride. We went back inside. The dim hall greeted us with its familiar cramped silence. After the cool air outside, the air in here felt a little heavier. Following Ernie, I still couldn't stop myself from asking, "Who is he?" Ernie hummed. Lei, he's our liaison, let's call it that. So, in the criminal underworld, a liaison is someone who connects people, places, and deals. A liaison knows who can be trusted, where to find the right person, who to use as a go-between, whom to ask for information, and whose name is better not spoken at all. They can strike bargains, smooth over minor conflicts, and keep lines open when an outsider would receive nothing but a polite smile and a closed door. Sometimes a liaison works as a translator, not so much of language as of the rules. Oh, I don't know. Let me check. Lo, for instance, the blue-haired guy, he's the Wrath. Oh, he's the Wrath. Okay. And there's like a purple-haired guy that we haven't met yet, which is the Lust. And Lei, this guy is Dependency. I think you say it like this, Dependency, right? I think it's like this, yeah. So let's continue. He paused for a second, searching for the right word. He's got his own business and connections in Chinatown. It might not be obvious at first glance, but he's an important part of our gang. Without him, a good third of what we do would grind to an halt. Grind? That thing of like using the same words. A district in a large American city where Chinese immigrants and their families have historically settled. There are usually more signs with Chinese characters, more shops selling herbs and spices, more small places where it smells like fried rice, tea, and something sweet I can't quite name right away. From the outside, it's easy to romanticize it. Strings of lights, red lanterns, exotic streets, and a movie-like atmosphere. But in reality, Chinatown is not a backdrop. It's a living community that holds together through its own rules, connections, and habits. People go there not just for food or goods, they go to meet their own, speak a language that feels natural to them, and feel a little less alone in a foreign country. At the same time, there are almost always a lot of rumors around Chinatowns. On the news, they are either shown as dangerous areas or used as convenient, scary story for outsiders. In crime stories, you almost always see smuggling, opium, underground gambling, and secret societies pop up nearby. And in that flood, it's easy to forget that ordinary people live there too, just trying to survive, work, and keep the outside world from breaking them completely. He really doesn't look like someone connected to all of this criminal business at all. We went up the stairs. Ernie walked a little ahead, but not too far, as if he was deliberately keeping me within sight so I wouldn't feel left behind. Yeah, the thing it's like sometimes like in these places you kind of have like mafias. Like you have mafias. It's just that. At the familiar door, he stopped and opened it, letting me step inside first. Alright, for now, you'll have to wait a little longer. He leaned a shoulder against the door frame, looking at me more seriously now. When Will gets back, we'll call for you. Ray will decide what happens next, and maybe they'll finally explain a little more to you. I nodded, feeling that faint anxiety return again, mixed with anticipation. All right. Ernie gave a short nod in return and stepped back. Just don't repeat your mistake and try exploring this place on your own again, all right? Next time you might run into someone worse. He smirked, gave me a half-playful wave in farewell, and disappeared into the corridor, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I spent another couple of hours in the room. Time dragged like molasses. I sat on the bed, sometimes staring blankly ahead, sometimes going over everything I learned so far. A few times I caught myself listening for sounds in the corridor, but it stayed quiet. When there was a knock at the door, I flinched without meaning to. May I come in? The door opened a little and Dan appeared in the doorway. He looked slightly tired but calm. Everyone's gathered, you need to come downstairs. He was already almost gone behind the door again when I, surprisingly even myself, hurriedly stopped him. Dan? He turned around. I felt an awkward swell of gratitude rise in my throat, but I forced the words out anyway. Thank you for everything. Dan looked caught off guard for a second, then gave me that same soft, slightly awkward smile. It's nothing, I just did what any decent person would have done in that situation. He gave a slight shrug, as if he didn't want to make too much of it. Come on. We stepped out into the corridor and headed downstairs. With every step down the stairs, the tension in my chest grew tighter. The closer we got to that room, the stronger the urge became to turn around and run back. When Dan opened the door, it felt like a wave of heat washed over me. This was where I'd woken up yesterday. This was where all of it had happened. Not now. I forced myself to breathe and step forward. The familiar faces were already waiting inside. Ray was sitting in his usual careless pose, one leg crossed over the other, his elbows resting on the back of the chair. Ernie had taken a spot off to the side, leaning against the table and rolling a coin between his fingers. Lo stood by the wall with his arms crossed over his chest. His gaze was heavy and distant. Lay had taken a place by the wall as well, his hands folded behind his back. His posture was composed and faintly guarded. Standing near them was another man, one I remembered only from yesterday's voices and a fake fragment of an impression. A streaked burgundy vest fit him perfectly, and the thin black gloves only emphasized his elegant long fingers. In the dim light, his sly smirk stood out all the more. So this had to be Will, the one Ernie had mentioned. Dan stopped just behind me, making it clear that from here on I was meant to manage on my own. Ray was the first to speak. That much was expected. Well then, he rapped his knuckles against the tabletop, drawing everyone's attention to himself for good, even though he already had it. Looks like we've finally sorted out your little situation, princess. He leaned towards me slightly, his gaze sharpening. We did our part and dug up everything we could on your lovely family. The man I had almost already nicknamed Will, in my head, gave the faintest twitch of a smile. As far as our connections and the telegraph could take us. So a communication system that sends messages over a distance through wires using electrical signals. Put simply, it's a way to send text so that it reaches another city in minutes or hours instead of days, like a letter. It does not work like a phone call. First, the message is converted into signals, most often Morse code, and on the other end, an operator decodes them back into words and writes them down on a paper. Yeah, and then you would go there and they would like give you the message. In the 1920s, the telegraph is still very important. People use it to send urgent news, business instructions, notices of death or disaster, warnings, and sometimes even orders and confirmations of deals. Messages are usually sent as telegrams. The shorter the text, the cheaper it is. So telegrams are written in almost telegraph style, with very few extra words and only the core meaning. Yeah, if you never saw it, it was like just like one sentence, and it was just like one phrase, like one simple tiny sentence, and sometimes you would even like shorten, like we shorten our messages, like when you send like a message and you kind of like you shorten some words, and they would kind of like use the same, but it would have to be like words that they already knew what in its shortened version meant. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? But it acted a bit like that. And you would actually have to go to the post to actually get your message. Okay, there was like no other way for you to know. You would have to go in there for them to tell you that you had like a telegraph. It was like that, and that was enough. Right, let's start with the important part. Your family was slaughtered down to the last one, which isn't exactly surprising. Cortes only ever kept a handful of his most trusted people close. He spoke calmly, almost casually. No close relatives who could pay for you are left, no generous uncles, loving aunts, or secret benefactors. My fingers curled tighter as the chill on his words slowly crept up to my throat. Outside connections are nearly non-existent too, other than the lovely Backridge Syndicate, which, as you can imagine, doesn't give a damn about the fate of some girl. So the syndicates, which are like the mafias probably. At its core, a syndicate is a group of people or organizations who act together to control the market, split profits, make decisions, and keep outsiders out. In the regular official world, the syndicate can be something like an alliance of major companies. They agree on who does what, how to distribute resources, who gets the contracts, and where the line of someone else's territory runs. But when the word syndicate comes up in a criminal context, the meaning gets a lot nastier. It's not just a partnership, it's a system. Its own rules, its own connections, its own people in the right places. And the most important thing, once you're inside, getting out is nowhere near as easy as getting in. It's like, that's why I was like talking about like the mafia kind of thing. A syndicate rarely looks like a single gang. More often, it's a network of different groups that might even clash with each other, yet still stick to one shared agreement because that's what pays off. They bargain over cargo, not orphan girls. He gave a lazy shrug. So as a bargaining chip, you are useless, I'm afraid. Useless. The word hit with almost physical force, leaving a dull ache in my chest. Ray shifted his gaze to the others as if summing things up so far. Time to decide what we are doing with our dear guest. He leaned back in his chair. We can't just let you go. You've seen our faces, seen this place, and trust me, I've got enough enemies without cheating you idiots who might decide to talk too much. Ray's voice stayed calm, almost bored. The simplest thing would be to kill you. He leaned towards me again, and a shiver ran through my body. For a second, everything inside me dropped away. The memory of the gunshot in New York flared up far too vividly. But unfortunately, he paused and cast a pointed glance at Dan. Our esteemed little saint doesn't want you dead. The mockery in his voice was unmistakable. Dan gave an awkward smile, neither arguing nor looking away. So that option is off the table for the moment, sadly. Ray straightened and tapped his fingers on the table again, as if marking the next logical step. If we're not killing you, that leaves one thing. Ship you off somewhere far away where no one will bother listening to your stories. He smiled almost gently now. Since I'm in an unusually good mood today, I'll even graciously offer you a choice. He raised 2 fingers. Option 1. Domestic service contract. Ray's eyes narrowed slightly and his voice turned lazy and smooth. We draw up the sweetest little work contract for you. A foreman we know finds you a nice quiet place out in the middle of nowhere, some ranch far from civilization. So this is usually what you call a large farm or estate, most often centered around raising cattle. Land, pastures, barns, corrals, horses, ranch hands, and that endless sense of open space where the horizon looks as if it's been drawn with a thin line. In Texas, the word ranch feels especially familiar. Here it's part of everyday life, as recognizable as dusty roads and the heat. Sometimes a ranch belongs to the same family for generations, and then it's almost a little kingdom with its own rules. And sometimes it's just a place of hard work, where the day starts before dawn and doesn't end when you are tired, but when you simply can't stay on your feet anymore. You'll be something like a housemaid there, laundry, cleaning, kitchen work. He waved a hand carelessly. On paper, it will all look lovely. Lodging, food, a year of work, a few clauses about deduction, and naturally a penalty for running away. A new town, a new name, no witnesses. A cold heaviness spread inside me. In other words, legal slavery with no say in it. We get paid up from front for your, let's call it, transfer. You disappear, we collect our commission, and everyone's happy. He fell silent, giving me time to digest it. Option 2. His gaze turns a shade more predatory. Entertainer contract. The last word came out especially sweet. There's a little waterfront cabaret in Galveston. Not a bad place. Semi-legal, like everything worth a damn in this state. Cabaret. An entertainment venue where performers go on stage in the evenings, music plays, people dance, and alcohol is served. On the surface, it can look like an ordinary place open to the public, almost a theater, only closer to a bar and much less respectable. The word cabaret for many people evokes glitter, a stage, feathers, and beautiful dance numbers. And yes, all of that is usually there, but in the 20s, cabaret was often just a pretty sign for something that, in practice, was much closer to prostitution. Yes. Law frowned and gave a quiet scoff, but didn't interrupt. We probably have to choose, so I'm just putting another save in here. The madam happens to like young, pretty faces. We sell you to the place as a dancer and a hostess. What happens to you after that is up to her. So the word hostess sounds almost harmless, especially if you picture a smiling girl at the entrance who greets guests and shows them to their table. In many ways, that is exactly how it is. A hostess is a woman whose job revolves around giving attention to customers. She smiles, talks, sets the mood, sometimes sits down beside them, keeps the conversation going, tops up their drinks, makes sure a man feels like a welcome guest, and leaves his money behind. In respectable places, it looks more like the role of the hostess of the evening. But in the semi-legal establishments of the 20s, the line between entertainment and selling a person became dangerously thin. The problem is that the word hostess is very convenient. It lets people talk about all this in a polished, seemingly cultured way without saying out loud the things that make your fingers go cold. We get our cash on delivery. You get red painted up and handed a brand new persona. Everything inside me knotted tight. A cabaret, alcohol, customers, it's prostitution in all but name. Legally, it's riskier than sending you off to the middle of nowhere, but keeping it within the state is easier than taking you across a border. Ray tilted his head slightly, looking straight into my eyes. Both options work just fine for me. In the first, you simply disappear. In the second, you go from that way to cash. No sentiment involved. I should probably add that... sorry. In the second option, you'll get to shine by the candlelight and to the sound of jazz before a crowd. Some girls who wander into places like that even mistake it for a career. He leaned back in his chair, letting it rock once. So then, princess, your choice. Okay, I don't know if he's going to ask me to choose. And you might be thinking, I would probably prefer to go to the ranch and be more like into slaver than actually going into the entertainment business. But I want to do something different in here, which is like, I think if he asks me, I am going into the entertainment business. And why is that? Because I feel like it's more related to her own sin, which is the pride, and we might find a way to actually raise ourselves more in the entertainment business than actually just working at a ranch. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Like, maybe we are going to get into a really bad position of like prostitution and all of it, but at the same time it's like, but maybe I will have a way of getting out with even like trying to find someone that would get us out of there. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Like, thinking about that. But I don't know if he's going to ask me. I'm just saying. For a second, the room seemed to close in. I could feel every pair of eyes on me at once. Dance with that unspoken concern of his. Low, steady, and level, though he clearly wasn't pleased with any of this. Ernest pretending he was looking elsewhere, even though he wasn't missing a single one of my reactions. Lay, his face calm, while mute guilt showed plainly in his eyes. And Will's, his fingers quietly tapping against the table, while that sly smile never left his face, as if he were enjoying this in his own way. Ray rolled one shoulder as though the conclusion had already been reached. Looking at all your unhappy faces, I feel compelled to remind you of our earlier conversation. Does any of you really want to lose your freedom and your life over one stupid mistake like this? We don't deal in human merchandise. We are not slavers and we are not pimps. Today is just an unfortunate exception. My fingers found the edge of my dress on their own, and the fabric pulled down in my fist. A choice between exile and being sold. Between vanishing into some godforsaken hole and living as decoration in a den. I took a deep breath. The fear hadn't gone anywhere, but something else was beginning to rise through it. There was one thing I knew for certain. Yeah, I'm not saying that I myself would choose that. I'm just saying, like, we are playing the game. Let's put it like, in kind of the logic of the game. She's like the pride, right? And like being shoved into a place where she will not even shine at all. It feels like, I don't know, it doesn't fit, right? There was one thing I knew for certain. Neither the ranch nor the cabaret is any kind of way out for me. I didn't get a second chance just to rot quietly in a place like that. If I was ripped out of my life and thrown in here, then I'll at least try to play by my own rules. Somewhere on the edge of panic, my thoughts suddenly began to snap into place far faster and more clearly than usual. It's astonishing how fast and efficiently the human brain can work when you're standing at the edge. I pushed the rest aside in my head and grabbed onto the one thing that mattered most to Ray. For him, usefulness was measured in fast money and the absence of loose ends. Every option was weighted through that exact filter. And right then, one very specific example surfaced in my memory. A regional history course, a lecture on the most notorious kidnapping in 20th century Texas. An article I had finished in the library that day instead of eating lunch. And on top of that, a computer game and a dramatized film that recreated the kidnapper's plan practically step by step. Back then, it had seemed like nothing more than an interesting story. Now it had suddenly become a possible map to salvation. I raised my head. I can be of far more use to you in another way. Okay, she's going to give another one because I was like, if I have to choose, I would probably go to the cabaret anyway. Because of the lore of the story, I was like, I thought it was more fitting, you know. My voice came out even, almost calm, though my heart was pounding so hard it felt ready to burst out of my chest. A brief silence settled over the room. Ray reacted first, of course, one brow arched, and a spark of genuine interest flashed in his scarlet eyes. You're serious? I nodded. Let me disappoint you right away. Personally, I have no interest whatsoever in your body. No, I'm not offering myself. He tilted his head with mild surprise. Then what exactly are you offering that would interest us? I took a short breath and continued. At the end of April, there'll be a small exhibition in Dallas, the Dallas Art Association's American and European Saloon of Decorative Art at the Adolphus Hotel. So, a city in Texas, slightly north of Houston. Compared to the noise of the port and the humid southern heat, Dallas feels different. It's more business-like and a bit more full of itself. If Houston lives on the sea, the docks, the warehouses, and the constant flow of contraband, Dallas feels like a city of money and ambition. By the 1920s, Dallas was no longer a small town. It was growing richer, filling up with offices, banks, hotels, and that specific atmosphere of a place where many things are decided not by fists but by connections and the ability to smile at the right moment. My knowledge of Dallas had always been more historical than personal. To me, it sounded like a point on the map where important fairs, exhibitions, deals, and meetings take place. I noticed the corner of Will's mouth twitch ever so slightly as if he recognized the name. Officially, it's a cultural event, and in reality, the exhibition serves as a cover for a closed black market auction. Black auction. To put it simply, black auction is trading in the shadows, a place where people sell and buy things that are either against the law, far too dangerous, or so dirty that no one even wants to name them out loud. You won't find ordinary goods here. This is where contraband, stolen jewels, rare documents, weapons, other people's secrets, and sometimes things that were never meant to become merchandise at all, show up. On the surface, everything can look almost respectable. Smiles, calm voices, careful beads, people in fine clothes, as if they've come to a high society event. but the meaning stays the same. There is no morality here, only price. The scariest thing about a black auction is that it doesn't look like some chaotic brawl between thugs from a cheap movie. Quite the opposite. It's often a highly organized system, with rules, security, middlemen, and people who know how to pretend that nothing illegal is happening. Everyone who comes here has already accepted one simple idea. If something can be bought, then it can be sold. And unfortunately, not everything on the list of lots is just an object. Yeah, it's not. Most of the time it was people too. Major collectors gather there, and among the lots there'll be one of particular interest. I held my breath for a fraction of a second and said it anyway. The original come and take it flag. Texans know how to put things briefly and very bluntly. This flag appeared during the Texas Revolution in 1835. Mexican troops came to the town of Gonzales to take back a cannon they had once given the locals for protection. The locals decided they weren't going to return anyway. So they painted a cannon on a piece of cloth, added a lone star, and wrote that phrase. The result was a symbol that breathes instantly, even without any historical context. What's funny is that historians still argue over the details. Some sources say the flag was raised right in the middle of the confrontation, others claim it was made afterward, once the event had already turned into a legend, but that doesn't really change its meaning. The cannon on the flag isn't about beauty or parades, it's about stubbornness, principle, and that inner feeling that we decide for ourselves what's ours. By the 1920s, the symbol no longer feels like breaking news. It's more like an old, deeply rooted piece of local pride that people can show off as casually as a family story. I grew up in New York, and people there know how to be bold too. But Texas boldness feels different. It's not about speed and ambition, it's about a firm, almost stubborn kind of calm. Ernie let out a barely audible whistle. Lay tipped his head to one side in confusion. And he's the greed. He will probably want that. Ray stared at me for a few seconds, then smirked. So, stealing a flag. He laughed so abruptly that it knocked the breath out of him. Then he tipped his head slightly, barely holding back another laugh. Do I look like a patriot to you? I held his gaze. This isn't about patriotism, it's about money. That flag has long been considered lost. To the right buyer, something like that is practically a myth. It'll fetch far more than any girl you'll try to sell off under contract. I stepped forward, forcing myself to look confident, even as tension twisted low in my stomach. I know how to get inside. They use a password at the entrance. And I know how to get the lot out before anyone even realizes what's happened. I know who can sell it to quietly for a very large sum. Deliberately, I kept surnames, names, and exact details to myself. For now, this was only bait. In return, you let me go if the plan works, and not just turn me loose. You give me a share of the deal. Enough for me to truly start over instead of ending up on the street after all your generous decisions. Ray was silent for a while, his usual mockery weared with the excitement that had plainly awakened in his eyes. But after a couple of seconds, he gave a dismissive snort. Sounds like nonsense. He was already about to wave off my words as another desperate attempt to save my own skin when another voice cut in. Wait. Will turned to me. His attentive, sharp gaze measured my every movement. He looked genuinely interested. Dallas, the Adolphus, the Art Association, there really is an exhibition planned there for the end of April. I've heard something along those lines before. He shifted his gaze to Ray. I want to verify it. Give me time. The room fell even quieter. seriously thinks she didn't make all of this up on the spot. Will shrugged. Those are awfully specific details for pure improvisation. If she's lying, it'll come out. If she isn't, ignoring a hull like that would be stupid even by your standards. Ray clicked his tongue loudly but said nothing. His usual distrust was clearly at war with his greedy curiosity. Will looked back at me. How do you know all this? I felt every last muscle in me tighten. Easy. You can tell them I saw a film and played a game based on this whole affair. No one here would understand, and they wouldn't send you to the ranch. They'll send you to an asylum. In this era, that would be far worse. By accident, I lowered my eyes, feigning slight embarrassment. By chance, before all this, I overheard my father talking to some man. Calling a complete stranger my father was still a little difficult. They were arguing about money and contacts. They mentioned the exhibition and said there was something else hidden beneath it. I felt silent for a moment, searching my memory for the right words. At the time, I thought it sounded like some kind of a scheme. I barely understood anything, but I remembered the name of the hotel, the flag, and the password. It was too strange to forget. I don't know anything about the smuggling operations. I never did. If he was involved in anything like that, it was carefully kept from me. All I have is that one overheard conversation and what I pieced together on my own. I allowed myself one more small pause. But if you agree to my terms, I'll tell you more, not just what I heard, but exactly how this can be done so none of you take the fall. Will watched me closely, weighing every word. At last he gave a satisfied nod. That's enough to start checking. My friends, I'm going to stop in here. Yeah, because I'm getting tired. And I actually need to go out today too. But to be honest, I really think we are very close to the end of the demo. As far as I remember. But I think you're going to spend at least a little bit more time with this guy. And I don't know if you're going to spend a little bit more time with the I don't know, blue hair guy. I don't remember his name. Lo. So we'll see it. Okay, maybe it's just 10 more minutes or something like that. I'm sorry if tomorrow I'm going to just give you like 10 more minutes of this, but I need to leave it in here today. But I want to continue. I'm not actually disliking. I think like the game is actually interesting. I actually like to read the notes, because the notes, usually you only have like notes of like very basic things, but this one actually adds stuff. It adds stuff. And I think that's very interesting, honestly. And I'm liking it. The English is good. I still don't know if this was written in English and then passed to Russian, or if it's really a Russian one that was passed to English. I still don't know about that. But the English is good. Yes, there's a lot of, that part I don't like as much. Like there's a lot of like a monologue narration here, tons of it, yes. Which I don't like as much. In fact, we haven't even gotten anything from the game, I would say. Like we've been in some hours in here and you still kind of feel like you're at the same point. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So like it's kind of like getting dragged, although I'm digging it at the same time, because it's like, man, it's fine. Like she's telling us how she's been feeling about things. She's kind of like taking it slow and seeing the things around her and all of it. So I'm like, yeah, but I mean, it's been fine. So I'm liking it. And I think we can continue, at least until the end of the demo. Yeah, I think I'm going to take this one until the end. But honestly, I don't actually remember if we are close or not. I remember that I think we're going to pass at least one scene with this guy. But I don't remember more than that, honestly, because I was just skipping. So we'll see it tomorrow, okay? For today, we're going to leave it in here, and tomorrow we continue. Okay? So Thank you very much for being in there. I'm going to leave the link in the description as always, for you to take a look if you want for yourself. So thank you very much, and we'll continue tomorrow. Thank you.